Alright guys, I'm doing the rear brake pads on my 2023 M4, and I came across a couple things that I figured it might be good to show you guys in a video because I didn't see it in any other DIY. Now this goes for 2020 and up, M3 and M4. And just changing out the rear brake pads because they're squeaky and they create a lot of dust. So I'll leave the part numbers to what brake pads I got and whatnot in the description, but so far I have the rear tire off and it's jacked up. Got supports in 2 different places, so I would recommend that. Also, just try to clean up everything. It's a lot easier to work in a nice clean area, and also a couple little lights helps as well. It's just generic information for any job really, but anyway, I'll show you what we're getting into here. Alright, I'll leave a list of the tools in the description, but you're going to need a 17 mil to get off the tires. You're going to need a 13 to get off the back caliper bolt, and then you're going to need a 17 mil wrench to hold the back caliper bolt while you unscrew the nut rather. And you're also going to need a 5 mil Allen key. You're going to need something long like this, and that's to get off the electric parking brake. And that's kind of what makes this job different than others. You can't just push back the piston. You have to first take off the motor that does the parking brake and then twist it. It's an easy process, but it's kind of intimidating at first. So that's kind of why I decided to make this video in the first place. But try to show you here. So that's one of the caliper bolts that we need to take off. There's another one on the bottom. This is the bracket for the motor here. There's only 2 bolts and it comes off, so it's not too bad. But without taking that off, you can't compress the piston enough to get it back onto the rotor. So I'll show you how we're doing it. Alright, first things, going to take off the 2 caliper bolts. 17 mil wrench, 13 mil socket on the back here. Hope you can see from there. If not, I'll show you after. It's pretty straightforward. That's what that bolt looks like. Can you see that? Has some Loctite on there. For the bottom bolt, it helps to have a little extension, and you're gonna do the same thing. Now leave this top bolt in while you break this other one loose, or else it's gonna try to turn like it just did on me. So I'm gonna try to show you guys everything how it is, even if it doesn't go exactly according to plan, because I feel like that's what's missing in some of the DIYs, is to show you it pops off real easy, but in reality you need to wiggle it or bang it or whatever. So leave that top bolt in, break this bottom one loose. Now I like to keep a little paint can to rest the caliper on, because you don't want it hanging by the brake line. Alright, I'm gonna undo this little brake pad sensor, which kind of just popped out as I took it off. And also take it off of the bracket here. And then also this other line here, which is the plug for the electric parking brake. Just gonna pop that off its bracket. Set the whole thing down. Kind of need to stand it up like that. So now we have parking brake sensor. Took that off. Popped it out of the bracket right here, and then this is one of the bolts we need to get to, and the other one right there on the other side, and they're on there pretty tight, so you kind of need a long extension, kind of thin extension really, something like this, to get on here and break both of those loose. Okay, once those two bolts are off, we can take this bracket off and out of the way. That leaves this motor on here. And all you do is just lift it straight off, and we're gonna hang it over here somewhere. Just pops off. And we're gonna set it right over here. That's what the inside looks like, just a spline. Set it right there for now. And this is what the inside portion of the caliper looks like. Now using a T45 Torx, I'm going to put it in that spline and turn it clockwise. Now it's not a T45 per se, but this works just as well because you don't have to turn it very hard. Just put it in here, just turning it. You should be able to do it by hand. And this is just pulling that piston off of that caliper so we can push the caliper piston inward. So it stops right there. That's it. Now with your caliper tool, you should be able to push that piston in pretty easily. On the driver's side, I was able to push it in with just my hands, but this one seems to be a little bit tougher. So I'm gonna use this and just compress that piston in. Okay, now compress the piston in. It didn't go very far. Doesn't need to go very far. And that is the hardest part of the job. Other than that, this job would take 10 minutes because all you do is just pop out the brake pads, pop the new ones in. Now that we can press the piston, we can put the motor back on, put the bracket back on, and the bolts. And I'll let you know if there's any trouble. Now there is an O-ring here, so when you put it on, try not to scrape it around too much. And it really only goes on one way, so you can't really mess that up. Just kind of wiggle it and you'll kind of feel the splines align. And then you just put the bracket back on and the two bolts. That's it. Alright, got the motor back on, got the bracket back on. I'll put all the clips and wires back later. Just make sure you get these pretty tight. It was a little bit of a hassle to wiggle this back on and get this to line up, but it wasn't too bad. So now the easy part of actually changing the brake pads. So I'm going to use a little bit of this synthetic Ultra Lube. I'll put that, just kind of thin layer across the back here, a little bit on the ears here. Just really trying to avoid the brake squeal. Buy a $100,000 car and it squeals like a pig when you hit the brakes. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to grease these up real quick. Here's the new pads greased up. Here's the old pads. You just pop right out. Just like that. And the new pad goes in. And we got the new pad. Goes in. Just like this. It's really not that hard, but it's kind of hard to do with one hand. Let's push that all the way against the rotor for now. Same process on the back. I'm not going to record it, but same thing. Okay, now we're just going to put the caliper back on. I think if you got this far, you can agree that the hardest part is now over. And this job would be very, very easy if you didn't have to take off that motor to compress the piston. But it is what it is. Okay, now I don't know the torque spec for these bolts because to use BMW TIS you have to pay either $30 for 24 hours or like $2,500 a year, and I don't want to pay that. But if anybody does know the torque specs, please put them in the comments. Alright, last thing to do is to put these back in their grommets. And just pop right in. Got that one there. And then we're going to plug in our brake pad wear sensor. Okay, I couldn't do by holding the camera, but it's plugged in right there. And then we're just going to plug this back into its little place here. and again right here. Make sure everything is back in its place, and you're done. In case you're wondering what we're working on, this is a base model black sapphire metallic with stealth PPF, Expel Stealth PPF over the entire car with clear on the carbon bits. It is lowered on AST springs, has 15mm spacers all the way around, has Fiona red interior, full leather, which basically just means your dash, low part of the dash is red. This is a Turismo steering wheel, and it has the carbon buckets. That's pretty much all I've done to it so far. So just some closing remarks for the brakes. It's not a hard job back here. It's just intimidating with that electronic motor, and I think the hardest part is just getting over the fear of messing with the brakes on this car, especially with the electronic parking brake. This job would be pretty easy if it wasn't for that. Overall, it's still not that bad. It probably takes an hour. Oh, also, I took off the cap to the brake fluid reservoir. I don't know if it was necessary, but can't hurt, I guess. So I took that off. Anyway, this job wasn't that hard, like I said before. I'm not a mechanic. I don't claim to be a mechanic. So if I can do it, pretty sure you can do it too. In your garage, it doesn't take that many tools. It's kind of intimidating at first, like I mentioned, but overall, it's not that bad. So after we're all done, we're gonna bed in the new brakes. From the videos I've seen, it's typically done by going about 35 and kind of gradually slowing down to about 5 miles an hour. You do that about 10 times, and then you do a couple from 45 more aggressive stops. And then after that, you should be good to go. And that about concludes this video. Thanks for watching. Sorry if it was a bit awkward. It wasn't my first video, and I'm definitely not a pro at this, but I wanted to give you guys some tips that might help you, because the only other video I saw didn't really mention anything about taking off that motor. I had to kind of look around. So other than that, the job is pretty easy, and hope this helps.